Huh? Hello, so very good afternoon to everybody here today. My name is Rahul Kulkarni. I work with Elkay Silicons, and I am here to just simply give you update of some of the world of different nature of surfactants to what most of the people are used to, that is silicon-based surfactants. I don't know how many people in the audience are very well versed with silicon surfactants, but in case you're not, I hope that this will educate you. If you're already well versed with them, then this may be a little bit boring. So I'll actually proceed. First, I'll just have one slide on who we are. So Elkay Chemicals or Elkay Silicons is a 30-year-old, 29-year-old company based out of Pune, and we are a very technology-driven company. In other words, we are a company who looks to focus on performance-based chemicals and products, and that is mainly what most silicons do and give. You can see what we do. We are actually majorly focused on from everything from domestic to exports. We've exported to 29 countries across the last 21 years. And we run 3 plants. They're all based in this area within 3 hours of the Mumbai area. And our head office is in the city of Pune. So now I'll actually get into what are silicons. So just as a background, first of all, I am the technical director there. So I actually look at R&D. And my job is to make people more aware of silicons and what they can do for you. So we'll go to where they actually come from. So the second item, laser pointer. The second item you see there is silica. Silica is the naturally occurring form of silicon. And the majority of the material in the Earth's crust is made out of silica. So silica is sand, and silica is also glass, what you see, which is purely as highly refined sand. From silica, what people will do is you can reduce it to the metal silicon, which is Si up there. Silicon as a metal is not formed naturally in existence. And silicon, as we may have heard of many times, is used in our semiconductor chips, in photovoltaic cells. And once you finish with this application, you can then convert them into something called silanes. So we react silicon metal with organic groups like methyl chloride or something of the sort, and you can actually form silanes, which is the third item there. And then you can take silanes and actually form polymers. And the basic polymer is the structure which you see in number 4, which is silicon oil, which is polydimethyl siloxane. This is the basic polymer unit for these silicons. Now, the interesting thing about silicons is that we don't stop here. We can continue much further. And that is because silicons have the ability to be combined with organic molecules very easily. There's a lot of chemistries we can do to get them inside. But essentially, we can take silicons and we can put in a hydroxyl group, your regular amine groups, your polyethers, your epoxy groups, whatever you want to do, almost any organic chemistry, you can build on the silicon. And that leads to a variety of possibilities, which are very exciting. And there's no way I can cover it in this particular small talk here. But then I'll just simply now go and isolate it down to what we can do with silicon surfactants. That is, silicon with either of different types. So you can have silicons, you can make your usual cationic surfactants, you can make your usual anionic surfactants, and you can make your non-anionic surfactants. Now, because of various items, and mainly, of course, our favorite item, which is called cost, we tend to move, and a majority of silicons are all the non-ionic type, which are the items at the very bottom. So the non-ionic types, now you'll see that silicons are a little interesting here, because what little things I've drawn on the side, if I take the blue section to be the polyether, which is the most common hydrophilic section of a non-ionic surfactant, you'll see that we can form various structures. You can get blocky, so you can get multi-blocks. You can get ABA type, the very top one here. You can get comb type, and you can get T-junction type. Now, if you go back and think about your regular organic surfactants, they're all not normal organic surfactant structures, which means we can get into a whole bunch of different applications and variety of features available in silicons which are not available in organics. The other interesting part about this thing is that if you look at an organic backbone, so you take your TDA or your Laurel or anything else which you see, you'll notice that these are all hydrophobic, but they're oleophilic. Silicons are oleophobic also, to the extent in this case here. So when you mix a silicon surfactant with a normal surfactant, they do not like each other so much. And therefore, you'll see that you may often get synergistic or also desynergistic properties. And to be honest, it's a little bit of a bucket game over here. You never know what you're going to get. So you have to try it out. But essentially, I'll show you in the next couple of slides some of the studies we've done, both as a neat product of what silicons can do for you, and also the exciting world of combining silicons with organic surfactants to get a boost to the organic product, which you would not have gotten otherwise. So why silicons? First of all, silicons can get you much lower surface tensions than what you normally will get. So silicons can go down as low as 20. Organics will go down to a region of 30. Fluorosurfactants can go down a little bit further, but fluorine chemistry is another complicated ballgame. Silicons are generally much easier to make, cheaper, and much more environmental friendly than what fluorochemistry will do. Because of the different nature of items we can do, I can make silicon super hydrophobic. They will repel water like nobody's business. Or you can also make them super hydrophilic. The world's best wetting agents are silicons. They're very stable and easy to handle. Stable across a wide range of properties. Very good lubricants. Because if you think about it, you mix the silicon in with anything else, silicon has a lower surface energy. It goes to the surface. And therefore, when you mix two different items with a little bit of silicon, silicon comes to the surface. Silicons are excellent lubricants. And you also have a very high partitioning coefficient. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So essentially what ends up happening is that we as a manufacturer can actually, or a technical manufacturer, performance-based manufacturer, can see a question out there and we can do different engineering. And for us, engineering is a little bit easier than what we get with organics. Because if I want to change my organic feedstock from a C13 to a C13 branch to a C10 to a C11, I have to find a different manufacturer. There are only 2 or 3 in the world. Here, I can do everything in-house. So we can change the molecular weight range. I can change whether I put an EO or an EOPO or an EO7, an EO12, or do I want to change the structure? There's so many different things I can change in the molecule. And I can also get different architectures. I can make it comb, as I said, stars and everything. So overall, though, silicons can be synergistically co-formulated with organics to give you a boost. And I'll talk about a few of the boosts coming up. And we also have the usual wide compatibility with different mixtures, solvents, and other items. Another very important thing about silicons is, if you came and I gave this talk 25 years ago, silicons were about 5 to 10 times the price of an average organic surfactant. Today, that number in times has come down to the same price. So price-wise also, they're coming into the region of being more favorable. On an average, most silicon surfactants are maybe 1.5 times the price of an organic surfactant. So which means that people can start thinking about using these on a much more commonly. Today's silicon surfactant market, it's very difficult to get data on how big the market is because there's so many mixtures. But pure silicon surfactant market alone is about maybe $250 to $300 million today, growing at about anywhere from 7 to 10%. Once you consider the blends, the market is in the billions of dollars, billions. So while I've talked about this to some extent, what is, for anybody who's interested in the chemistry part or the physical chemistry part, what is the real difference between silicons and organics? One is that although we'll draw this segment to be quite a nice little orange squiggly line, in an organic, that is CH2. CH2 is very compact. In silicon, that's Si with CH3 on it. This is much more bulky. So that little orange noodle in the middle is actually much thicker than what you normally will get. This means that they are very difficult to pack. It also means that they have very high mobility because they don't like to pack. So if I don't want to pack and form a nice ordered structure like how you all are sitting in, they're just doing what they want and they're running around everywhere. They're also very low surface energy because the CH3 group has one of the lowest surface energies of what's available out there. Now the thing about silicon surfactants is that if you come back to your normal application of surfactants, which is solubilizing or making an emulsion, these are very, very bad at it because they don't like to pack. So this means that if you're going to, you want to disperse a mineral oil into water, don't have to use silicons. Or you can use it, they'll give you some of the other properties. They'll give you more stability to your emulsion, but they're not your primary solubilizing agents. However, they do everything else. And these other things they can do is they can do leveling, they can do wetting, they can do super spreading. So another item which is not very well studied in this case here is that how do these thick noodles interact with organics? And I think even today in 2019, there's at least 20 years of work still left to do to figure out what they can do with some of the exciting new products even the organic surfactant manufacturers are coming out with at the moment. So when did silicon surfactants come out? The whole silicon industry in general grew in the 1940s when the original company which started most of these items was a combination of Dow and Union Carbide. And they realized long ago that silicon surfactants, because of the low surface tension, they're able to stabilize foams very well. And they started using this in polyurethanes. That was the time when polyurethane foams in the 1950s was going up in business. And they discovered over time that they can make silicon surfactants which can give you rigid structures, flexible structures, open cell foams. And today, that is still a majority of the use of silicon surfactants, these type of foaming agents. They can stabilize, compatibilize, and they can also help you disperse any external gas also into your foams. But the next use came in the 1960s and 70s was in personal care. Because besides the fact that they form very stable foams, and the first application for most men is your shaving cream. If you remember your shaving creams back in the day, they were very astringent. In other words, because they are made out of anionic surfactants, they will pull the moisture out of your skin and leave you with a very dry face. Today, when you use silicon surfactants in many of these applications, they're non-ionic, they're very good humectants. They leave the moisture on your face and give you a much more comfortable feel. So besides this, you'll see their applications in shampoos, skin care, because besides being good foaming agents, they're also very good spreading agents. So if you have a problem in your personal care formulation trying to spread your cream on your hands, you put a silicone in, more often than not, it will solve your problem. Another application that came up also was froth flotation in mineral and mining. So in mineral and mining, you'll find that your best dust collectors are silicons, because silicons love to wet. Especially if you go back to thinking, in mineral and mining, what is my clay? My clay is actually an aluminosilicate. So the silicon-silicate interaction is very, very strong. So when you're talking about dispersing a clay, some of the best clay dispersants are again silicons. Some of the best clay suppressants, so in other words, wetting agents for clays are again silicons. And also they were used because of the stable foams into froth flotation applications. So this was the past. I'm just now giving you one example slide on what we have ourselves studied in the last couple of years on mixing silicons with other surfactants. Because again, due to cost restrictions, people don't want to always use silicons pure. Plus, because silicons are not very good solubilizing agents, you can use it with an organic solubilizer to make a very good emulsion. And in fact, we've seen that if you use the correct product, you can actually enhance the solubilization of your surfactants, organic surfactants, with using a little bit, say 2 to 5% silicon in your formulation. This is one example also for terms of creating foam. The blue line here is the silicon. You can see in the leftmost slide that the silicon, this is a silicon super wetter, forms a very stable foam. Second product in the red is La10, lauryl alcohol 10, and your NP10 is your gray line. They're just different how the foaming profile is. So we originally foam, and then we watch the foam decay. So if I take a silicon super wetter is a T-junction type molecule, which I'll talk about in the next couple of slides. You will see that you mix it with La10, you will suppress the foaming of La10. So the orange line there is the combination of the two. So not only do you generate less foam when you mix it with La10, you will actually kill the foam also much more rapidly. Which is interesting because you can defoam some of your organic surfactants where you have foaming problems, you don't want to go and put in your POs into your products. You put in 2% of a silicon surfactant, you'll actually start defoaming it very, very quickly. In the case of people who want to foam, you can do something about that also. So again, the blue line on the last slide is on the rightmost section is the same super wetter. I've changed the concentration. That's why the profile looks a little bit different. And the green line below is an organic bio-based organic surfactant. You mix the two up together, you suddenly see you get a foam boost. So synergistic effects, depending on how you look at it, are possible with it, which do not make any normal sense, but you can see the effects when you actually go and run your applications. So therefore, one of the most common applications today for silicons is defoaming and de-emulsifying products. If the surfactant, as we know, has a little bit of incompatibility with the media, you can start defoaming. And because in silicons, we can vary the nature of the molecule quite rapidly, they are becoming more and more popular as a defoaming agent. Second place where it's useful, especially in paints and coatings, is that besides being simple defoamers, they also are wetting agents because they have very low surface tension. So not only do you get wetting, you get no pinholes because you're acting as a defoamer, and you also get anti-mar because the silicon, at the end of the day, when you finish a coating, how does the structure sit? The silicon comes to the surface. Silicons are naturally repellent materials, so you get an anti-mar behavior also out of your product. So it's a very interesting application for this type of defoaming. You can also defoam other applications. You want to defoam sugar foams, fermentation foams, other industrial applications. It's all possible with the silicons, depending on how we make them. Another interesting thing about silicon defoamers is that because of the nature of the structure, they're a little bit more robust. So you can get much wider temperature ranges for use than what you get with other types of products. Another interesting thing is that, again, since silicon doesn't like to pack very nicely, silicons also assist the movement of not only themselves, because they're very mobile molecules, they'll also assist the movement of anything they want to take with them. So the silicon's running away, it will also start dragging the organic with it. So when you go into some of the newer applications in oil field, which is of de-emulsification, you'll find that a lot of people have found that adding 2 to 5% silicon into their de-emulsification surfactants, it will start dragging the de-emulsifier to the interface much faster than what you'd get normally. And therefore, your speed of separation of the crude and water mixes, if you're in the petrochemical industry, where you don't want to carry water with you in your pipeline. Water is a big problem when you're trying to pump oil across pipelines. And we have pipelines running all over the world right now here because water carries salt, water carries acid. They both corrode the steel in the pipelines. So they want to get rid of the water as fast as possible. Silicons, therefore, in this case, when you mix it with organics, will give you a much clearer interface, will separate much faster, and can also reduce the temperature of the demulsification process. So again here, this is a very synergistic application with the organic products. So the last couple of slides here I'll talk about is one of the unique products in silicon, and that's something called the trisiloxy silicon superwetter. Now trisiloxy, this is the, I don't know if you remember in the first couple of slides, this is the T-junction molecule. And the T-junction molecule, actually, if you think about it, is a very unusual structure in the world of surfactants. Because most surfactants are, you'll have a couple of branches here and there, but you don't get T-junctions. And the T-junction is very unique because you'll find that in this case here, you'll see the upper drop there. This is the upper drop, which is still intact, has been wet by a normal lauryl alcohol surfactant. And you can see that it is just simply changed its contact angle a little bit, but it stayed right where it is. The silicon has completely disintegrated that drop there. And there's a reason for that, which is interesting. And it's because that the silicon trisiloxy superwetter can, it has a very low surface energy, it's 20 dynes. So it can sit and penetrate, it can spread. But if I take a fluorosurfactant, which has got a surface energy of 16, and I try to do this application, it doesn't work because fluorosurfactants pack very well. The silicons, I'll just go ahead in some slides, they hate to pack. That's because of the T junction. Now, it may not come, I just ask you to imagine this. If I ask any one of you to sit and pack a bunch of T's in a box, you'll say it's very easy. Put a bunch of T's in a box, you line them up in a straight line. It seems very simple. But put the next line, and you'll see that the bottom of the T has a huge space between the next bottom of the T. And in the real world, molecules don't like doing this. So they say that instead of doing this, we're just going to break. And that's kind of what happens. And you can see here that organic structures, which are like this, when you make them into T's, the T's keep hitting each other. And because they keep hitting each other, the silicon superwetters cannot form a stable structure. And therefore, they're always available at the interface. They're always available to do something else. They cannot micelize anything for the life of them, but they therefore keep items spreading. So whenever you have a problem where you want water, especially, to move, you want water to penetrate a substrate, you want water to wet a substrate, you want water to spread across a substrate, a silicon superwetter is a fantastic option because nothing else in the world does this. So you can see on the slide over there, that's a drop of ink. And what the drop of ink does, the moment I touch it with that pin, the same pin, it just goes through. So the question is that it's a nice looking thing, but what can we do with it, right? Because besides the fact that I have a very low CMC on this, I can spread very fast, 25 times faster than a normal a surfactant. I can also foam using this material at very, very low concentrations. I can penetrate a lot of items which are very difficult to penetrate otherwise. Okay, and I can also get very unique properties when I mix these with other surfactants. So it leads to a whole plethora of opportunity, which are some are explored and some are not explored. So I'll just have one or two applications coming up. But again, just to remind everybody, when you mix this with a regular surfactant, again, the effects are not additive. So an example, when I mix this with LA, 30 to 70, 10 mixture, in the beginning, surface tension looks like, that's concentration profile. At low concentrations, surface tension looks like LA. At high concentrations, the surface tension looks like the superwetter, going under 20. Another interesting thing is that even if I'm at high concentrations, dynamically, if you look at it, the moment I add this surfactant onto the surface of water, instantaneously my surface tension drops down to the surface tension of the superwetter because it comes out first, down to 20. And then I go back to my equilibrium surface tension of, say, 26 or 28, whatever it is. So some interesting studies which are maybe relevant to us today. One is water absorption and water consumption. Today in the agro business, or in general, we are facing a huge water crisis. And the water crisis, we're seeing that anything that we can do to save water is actually very useful. So this is one study we did about 2.5 years ago with the people who own stadiums. So for anybody who watches the IPL today, I don't know if you remember, 3 years ago in 2016, the IPL was taken out of Mumbai and Pune. Why? Because we had a big major drought going on. And the last thing people wanted to see was the drinking water being used to water a stadium. On an average, a stadium like Wankhede will take 4 liters of water per day per square meter of grass to keep it watered. And being an international class facility, you cannot afford to have an empty patch on your stadium lawn because the fielder, when fielding, is going to fall and trip. It's just not allowed anymore. So what we did was that we started showing them that if you add 0.05% of the adjuvant in the water every third day, you can bring down the overall water consumption by half. Which is very interesting, because now if I'm using 40,000 liters of water per day at Wankhede, I can drop it to 20,000. Now, it did not bring the IPL back to Mumbai, but it remains as a possibility in the future of what we can do. And plus, we are now starting to look, and we also are inviting partnerships to go and take this out into especially eastern Maharashtra, where there are major water problems coming up, because this can also be used in crops. Now, the mechanism of this is a little bit different though, because if you think about it, silicons allow water to go in, they also allow water to come out. So the only difference between not using a silicon and a silicon is that the penetration of the water when you're adding it has gone down much deeper. But what it has done when it's gone down deeper is that when we did the trials in Pune, we found that the root structure of the grass, normally, of that particular grass we were studying, was only 1 inch deep. When you started adding the silicon, after about 1.5 months, the root structure went almost 2 inches deep. Because the roots were able to find water much deeper, they grew a much more dense root structure. That dense root structure can pick up and pull up much more water. And second of all, it also has much more time to get into the root structure. Therefore, you're able to use less water into your in your systems over there. So this can possibly, we're still exploring the possibilities of using this to sugarcane and any other crops which are out there. Another thing is that as soils from heavy pesticide use have become hydrophobic, especially again if you go to eastern Maharashtra or Madhya Pradesh, you can actually start wetting these hydrophobic soils with silicons. You'll start again getting the penetration. And some studies which we have observed and are trying to do ourselves also is that what happens to the silicon when you put it into the soil? The silicon ends up degrading back into the core constituent of itself, which is silica. And the ethylene glycol part will degrade back into CO2 and water over the course of time in the presence of enzymes. This takes a couple of days to happen. It's not a couple of years. One other trial we did was with flowers. So the main idea of why these are useful is especially in the agro business if you go to drip irrigation. When you go to drip irrigation, a lot of people are now spraying micronutrients across on the tops of the plants. When you do this, and you add a little bit of the adjuvant into it, you'll start enhancing the penetration of the micronutrients into the flowers, into the plants, and you increase their pickup and the speed of penetration of them. So normally when you have a leaf, most leaves are hydrophobic, the drop of water will fall off and go into the mud. When you add this inside, it will stay on the leaf surface, and not only stay, it will actually penetrate into the leaf surface. Thereby, you will be able to increase the efficacy of your products. So in the case here we showed, this is done with the Agricultural College in Pune. We showed in the use of gerbera, our product was able to increase the yield of 1 acre of gerbera by 2.16 lakh flowers. When you used it at, I think this was 0.05% in the micronutrient drip, only 3 times in the whole life cycle of the product. This is actually about a 21 to 32% increase in the yield over there. So small amount can go very far away if it's used correctly. We did some experiments in textiles also, because one thing, if you think about it, if you want penetration, we would love to penetrate into a stain. So we showed that this is again a synergistic property. Alone, this was here, the higher the number in the graph there, the better the removal of the stain is. So this is without using pure water. This is, I think, a coffee stain and one's a marker stain, permanent marker stain. You'll see that the stain removal was only 18% if we just simply dumped it in water and washed it. If we dumped it in the pure silicon, which is not a good solubilizer, but very good penetrating agent, you'll see that you can take out about only 35 to 38% of the stain. The other surfactant here being used was NP in this case here, and the other one on the side is LA. You can get out a lot of the surfactant. You can get a lot of the stain, but you also start increasing the ability to redeposit the stain on other parts of the cloth. And you'll see that if you went to a 25% mix of the silicon super spreader, we can remove the highest amount of the stain. So again, a synergistic effect to enhance the penetration of the surfactants into the stain, and we see even better results if you are able to pre-treat the stain with the surfactant, because again, penetration is a key here. In coatings, we see that silicon polyethers, the same super spreaders, can drop the interfacial tension down to less than 1 dyne per centimeter, and this allows very good dispersion of your pigments and other items. So if you want to disperse pigments and fillers into a lot of water-based media, this is a very good option. And as I mentioned before, you can get, besides just being a dispersing aid, you can get other benefits out of the silicon. This leads to actually one very interesting application, if you think about it, is that it has now been about 12 years since the paint majors have introduced silicon-based paints. Silicon-based paints on all your high-rises in the city of, say, Mumbai are fantastic because they retain the original look of the paint for as long as 10 years. But the problem is it's 10 years. You're now hitting year 11 and 12. The problem of recoating these buildings is actually quite monumental if you think about it. Because if you go back and try to apply the same acrylic emulsion or the PU emulsion onto these buildings, it just simply falls off. Your contractor will throw himself into the river when he tries doing it. So we found that, of course, there are ways to get over it. One is you simply scrub off the building. Now, scrubbing off an 11-story building is no joke. Second option is you use a solvent-based primer. Again, solvent-based, people are trying to steer clear of solvents. If you put in the silicone super spreader, you can actually start wetting the previous substrate. It's one of the only items that will help you wet a silicone-based paint. It's another emerging application of the silicone super spreader. So I think overall, just want to show, I hope I've kept you all interested with this little short talk about what silicone super spreaders can do for you, or what silicone surfactants can do for you. If you have any other questions in different different applications, you have everything from wetting, detergency, foaming, release. We can help you out with any application you're looking for. Today we have a stall at D25 over here, and we'd be loving to talk to anybody who would like to come by. And thank you, and I'd like to take any questions.
Thanks, Rahul, for a very interesting talk. Introduction to a new range of surfactants, silicone. Thank you. This is a souvenir on behalf of Chemical Weekly and IIG.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, all of you, for making this 5th Surfactant Conference a grand success. Look forward to see you next year. We now continue with home and personal care after a break. Okay, thank you.